Our mission is to break cycles of incarceration and poverty in Oklahoma. And we do that through workforce training, building healthy relationships, providing direct services to our participants who've been involved in the criminal justice system. I figured I would start by going over what exactly we do at TEEM, the people that we work with, and our different programs that we have available here. So we work with people at a variety of levels of involvement in the criminal justice system. You'll hear us refer to the people we work with as participants. And then in general, the population will say people impacted by the criminal justice system, justice involved, impacted by incarceration. All of that is kind of what you'll hear us say about the people we work with. So we have our pretrial program, which is for those who have an open court case. Most of the time they are in the Oklahoma County Jail. They can't afford bail. And so they go through an interview process, and if they qualify, they are bonded out through a special TEEM bond and taken directly to TEEM. Our case managers pick them up, do an intake, and from there they're assigned a case manager who forms a relationship with them and helps refer them to different resources, whether it be they need housing, education, employment, transportation. We have bus passes available for folks, as well as we meet the immediate needs of people here at TEEM through our clothing closet. We have pretty big casual clothing and professional clothing closets. We get a lot of incredible donations from the community on a regular basis, so it's super helpful, as well as a hygiene closet. So a lot of people coming out of the jail don't have any clothes, any food, any hygiene. So we're able to meet those direct needs. And then of course they have to check in with their case manager on a regular basis. And then through our reentry program, that program specifically serves those who are either currently incarcerated and soon to be released, or they have been released from prison within the last 6 months, maybe a year. So it's most effective to kind of intervene soon after release, because people are faced with many barriers, and readjusting back into society after release can be pretty difficult. And so kind of meeting that head on can give them a head start in reaching their goals and figuring out what they need to do. So they again are assigned a case manager through TEEM who forms that relationship and meets with them regularly, helps them. Maybe they need help getting their ID back. A lot of people's IDs have expired. That's a huge obstacle right now, because process, even for people who've been outside for a while, is really difficult. So there's a lot of different needs, setting up a plan to pay their fines and fees. Many people, when they're released from prison, have thousands of dollars of fines and fees, and they have to pay those. So setting up a plan for that, and again, kind of providing them the resources they may need. Maybe it's sober living, recovery resources, all of that. And through reentry, we also have an Empower class, which is for those who are currently incarcerated. It's 2 weeks, and we will pick them up from their facilities, transport them to TEEM, and then they have 2 weeks of learning a variety of different skills, whether it's like financial literacy, building healthy relationships, discussing the obstacles they think they'll face when they're released, job readiness, putting in job applications. A lot of our partner facilities are have work release programs, so they can actually work while they're incarcerated. So through Empower class, we get a lot of our mentees. So the relationship can start the mentor-mentee relationship can start while they're still incarcerated. And I think it's going to go back to this because of COVID, but ideally the logistics would be if the mentor is DOC badged certified, so basically they've gone through Department of Corrections volunteer training and they're badged, then they can go into the facility and actually set up a time to visit with their mentee. Or we can set up a time here at TEEM, and TEEM is allowed to, our employees are allowed to go pick up that participant, bring them to TEEM to meet with their mentor. So that way they can start that relationship and start planning for the future. And then we have community sentencing, which is a court-ordered diversion program. And so instead of going to prison, being sentenced to prison, people will carry out their sentence within the community, and they're assigned a case manager with TEEM, and they have pretty strict guidelines and check-ins with their case manager. But the difference between like a probation type situation and a probation officer is our case managers really form that relationship and care a lot about their participants. For instance, this week, someone needed to be picked up from hours away from a treatment center because she was having a bad time, and so TEEM staff went and picked her up, that sort of thing. They really just care about the people they're working with, and that's kind of the key aspect of what we do at TEEM is we form healthy relationships with people, and that's really what people need when they've been involved in the criminal justice system. And that's where, of course, our staff comes in, but also the community at large, our volunteers, and especially our mentors. So focusing on those healthy relationships makes a world of difference for people who are trying to get back on their feet. And then in November 2020, we added our Veterans Initiative. So we recognize the unique needs that veterans face, especially those who have been incarcerated. They have a lot of unique challenges. And so we have a staff from the Office of Veterans Affairs here at TEEM. He's here to make sure that they're linked up with their benefits from the VA. So some people think, well, I've been arrested, I lost my benefits, but that's not necessarily true. So they get those benefits. So those are our 4 programs we have now. And initially with the mentorship, when I came in, it was specifically for reentry participants, but we're opening up mentorship opportunity to everyone in all of our programs. And it looks about the same. It's just that logistical factor if they're still incarcerated and going through DOC to link them up. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with mentorship. And during COVID, we had a lot of new mentors sign up, but of course they couldn't meet with their mentees. So that was a bit of a challenge. And we would have them introduce themselves through letter writing. And that was successful in some cases, but in a lot of cases, it was difficult to get a return letter. Kind of communicating in that fashion wasn't super successful, but there were some who, we had a participant who was released in, I think, November, and he and his mentor had been writing letters once a week for 2 years. And so he kind of spoke to that. Actually, the first time they met in person was here at TEEM. We were doing a little presentation with Life Church. So the mentor was with Life Church, and I asked, hey, would you like to meet and talk about your experience here? And that was a really special moment. The mentee was like definitely in tears, just talking about how much it meant to him to know that he had someone who cared enough to write to him regularly for 2 years, whenever his own family didn't really write to him much at all. So, and just having someone who's outside give perspective, because when they're incarcerated, the culture there and the way things work is much different. So he spoke a lot on that. So letter writing can be super effective. It just depends on the person and their personality. The goals for our mentorship program is really just to form a friendship, a relationship, provide positive, healthy relationships, encouragement, have someone there to walk with them. A mentee's goals can be very different depending on the mentee. So maybe one is wanting to learn about a specific trade, really wanting to learn, how do I get into school, or work on specific goals that they have in mind. And others might be in a different place. Maybe their goals are to reconnect with their family, to be a better mom, to work on their relationship with God, their spirituality. It can really vary. And so I work to make the right match between mentors and mentees. Our mentors are just incredible people. And a lot of them are folks who've been incarcerated themselves, and we call them peer mentors. And that is like invaluable for them to have that experience. A lot of them just want to show someone, hey, I've been there before and I was able to overcome it in these ways. And other folks, maybe they have, a lot of our mentors have experience like leading recovery meetings like AA and NA, and some of them, you know, have experience doing that within prisons. And so they just have a passion for working with people. And a lot of our participants do struggle with addiction and mental health. And so it's super helpful to have those mentors on board. And maybe some of our mentors have had family members who have been incarcerated, or maybe they've, you know, lost someone to addiction or something like that. So really, it's mainly people who are just wanting to give back and like feel connected and help specifically the populations of people we work with. We also have like business owners who like want to teach people how to start their own business and stuff. So it could be really cool. For instance, we have I just matched a participant in our pretrial program. He is like 21, so pretty young. He's been volunteering here to get community service hours as well. And I just matched him with a mentor who's a business coach and a business owner. So the mentee, the participant, he is in college right now and he's switching from like healthcare field to business. So made that connection, and already the mentor's like, you need to read these books, you know, giving him tips to help like open his young mind to the world. Those are kind of what our mentors look like and what our mentees look like. And right now, we currently have 37 active mentors. Most of them have one mentee. Some of them are waiting on a mentee. So that's another thing. It can be a little difficult on the mentee side. I'm trying to find the best way to communicate with them. This is what mentorship is. This is how it's helpful, and finding people who can really kind of commit to the relationship. And obviously with the people that we work with, it can be difficult because, you know, if something happens in their life where they're in survival mode, then the mentor relationship might not be their top priority, or maybe they lose their phone, or something happens, maybe they wind up back in jail, whatever it might be. And I always try to let our mentors know, like, that's very possible that could happen, but always continuing to try to reach out. So it's so important for our mentors to be consistent and gain trust. That's probably the number one like word that is used during like a mentor training, is really earning trust and developing a relationship and being consistent and stable, because so many of our participants have a history of like broken promises and trauma. So, but yeah, that is one thing I'm working on, is getting mentees who are really fired up to have a mentor. Some people are, you know, aren't as trusting of others. So our mentors are expected to meet at least 1 hour a month with their mentee. And it's recommended that they reach out at least once a week, like whether it be phone, text, social media, whatever communication that they've set up in that relationship as being the most comfortable and accessible. But then they're expected to meet at least once a week for at least 6 months for their mentor relationship. And of course, it can go beyond that, but I do expect the mentors to reach out to me when they've heard from their mentee and met with their mentee. And then at the end of each month, I'll send a little survey kind of talking about, I'll send it to all the mentors, like time for your monthly check-in or whatever, and ask them, you know, how helpful do you feel as a mentor? How strong of a bond do you have with your mentee? Has there been any challenges, any concerns? And sometimes I'll find something out through the mentor survey, like, oh, my guy's not doing so good. I think I'm a little worried about him. He's really looking for a job or something. And then I can kind of poke the case manager, like, hey, the mentor's a little concerned, like, would you check in? Maybe they have, but for instance, we have a lot of resources at TEEM, and I always encourage our mentors to remind that to their mentee. So we have an employment navigator. So if they're looking for a job, I encourage the mentors to remind them, hey, why don't you reach out to your case manager? And we do have pretty strict guidelines as far as what a mentor is allowed to do within the scope of their mentor relationship. So no lending money when they're incarcerated, buying them food. And it kind of goes just for like the safety of both parties, but also sometimes there can be a little manipulation that goes on where the mentee is, kind of using their mentor for extra food or something. So if they just set that boundary from the beginning, we have that boundary and that rule in place, then that eliminates that from happening. But as the relationship goes on, of course, like, hey, let's meet up for dinner. If the mentor wants to pick up the mentee and buy them a coffee, whatever it may be, it kind of just depends on the nature of the relationship. But I always just let the mentors know, like, be sure that you're super comfortable with your mentee before you like buy them anything or something like that, that you really know each other. When it comes to things like opening back up, I'm kind of excited to plan for all this. I really wanted to plan like mentor event nights. Maybe everyone goes to art museum or some special event that's going on in the city. Dedicate that time and help. We team staff will often transport the participants wherever they need to go. So if we were to set up an event night, we could make sure the participants can get there, the mentors can get there, and they can bond, have a good time, or ongoing tips and training for our mentors, like a little packet. So conversation starters, activity ideas, things to do together, maybe doing community service together, volunteering together, just like reminders for mentors. I'm also working on a way to kind of measure the goals of the mentee program, figuring out the best way to measure the outcomes of the program. So maybe after 6 months of the relationship, I check in and see how have their goals been met of the mentee. Maybe I'll check in with the case manager, check in with the mentee and the mentor, just get an all around feel for how it went, and did they achieve certain education goals like getting their GED, did they get a job? And that way we can kind of have numbers. I would like to have quantitative and qualitative. I have mostly qualitative information right now, like testimonies from people talking about how much their mentor means to them, or mentors talking about how much they have learned from this experience. But I don't have a lot of like numbers or quantitative information to measure the success of the goals of the mentorship program. So they go through the general volunteer training that we have for all of our volunteer opportunities. They'll go through that, and that's about a 30-minute overview of the orientation handbook. And then they'll have about a 20 to 30-minute additional training with our mentorship handbook, which just reviews like, these are the expectations, the do's and don'ts of mentorship, going over the logistics of how the program works and what communication is expected of them. And they undergo a state background check. And of course, if they have a record that doesn't disqualify them, we have a lot of people with a record who are mentors. It's just certain offenses, whether it be like a sexual offense, then they might not qualify. In addition to that, they have to have at least 1 year of sobriety and at least 1 year release from prison, and they cannot be currently on probation. So those are kind of our requirements for mentors. At least 21 years of age. We match mentors and mentees, same gender. Right now I'm doing like an interview where I ask them, what skills and hobbies, interests, religious preference, comfortability with like substance abuse and mental illness, and just kind of, do you have kids? Just getting to know them so I can make an appropriate match. I'm working on a more thorough form that they can fill out just to expedite that process as more mentors are coming in. But right now it's like a one-on-one. interview that occurs during the mentor training. And then when I find a match, I will let both parties know, mentor and mentee, and arrange a time for them to meet here at TEEM. And then they'll meet at TEEM. I recommend at least the first 2 meetings meet at TEEM, and depending on the nature of the conversation and relationship, they can set up exchange contact information. And again, that's kind of where, mentors can think ahead of time what boundaries they want to put in place, as far as, can they call me whenever, can they, email, whatever their preferred method of communicating might be. And then I ask that they, of course, I want to check in with both parties and make sure they're on the same page. And then the relationship kind of takes off from there, and I maintain communication and just make myself available to support in any way that I can. When it comes to the type of goals that a lot of our participants have and a lot of our mentors can help with, I like to remind our mentors, like, it can be big and small goals. It doesn't have to be these huge accomplishments, but like we mentioned, a lot of people may not have computer skills or computer literacy. So sitting down and working with them on just those tiny things is just as important. We say at least 6 months committed to the mentor relationship. Okay, after 6 months, check in, see how it's going, measure those, success of their goals and the success of the relationship, and kind of just have something to take away from that first 6 months. And if it continues to go on, then do that. But if they choose to, okay, I'm done with my mentorship or something, that way we just have a final conclusion to how the relationship went and how the goals were met. It's like business owners, or maybe they just have a heart for it. Especially within the last summer, Black Lives Matter movement, we got a lot of interest in general volunteerism, but also mentors. So I like to ask with our new volunteers, what made you want to get involved? And that was something that I noticed, is a few of them were, well, after seeing what we saw last summer, over the summer, I wanted to get back. A lot of our mentors, especially some of them that are retired, at least more than 2, have told me, I used to work in DHS or something, and I have experience. Maybe they were in the foster care system growing up and they went on into that field. So just in general, a history of working with people who may have been underserved throughout their lives, that tends to be the type of folks that want to mentor. In the mentor training, we'll go over certain things that were put together, research about like adverse childhood experiences and how that certain backgrounds are still being wrestled with within our participants, and to have people who are already familiar with that is really helpful. This is a collaborative effort, and they're walking together in their journey, as cheesy as that sounds, rather than this kind of assumed power dynamic that comes with mentor. And that's super true when it comes to self-esteem, especially with the women. That's super important, and just when it comes to trust as well, because I have heard, from participants before, like, oh, I didn't want to come to TEEM, these people don't understand me, at first, and then they actually come to TEEM, they say, oh, no, it's not like that at all. Like, they treat us like humans, not any, they treat us as peers, and yeah, it's super important.